It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Buongiorno tutti. Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. This is show number 238. Got a lot of fun things planned for today, so I'm going to give you a few highlights of what's coming up, and then we'll just kind of get started. We are going to talk to Tylean Polly a little bit later on. She put out a Christmas album of atheist music, atheist Christmas album, and I think you're going to enjoy that very much, and you might even consider buying it. And the nice thing about this is that if you, the listener, dear listener, spend money on things like this, more people will make things like this because they can make money. So it's not a bad idea to invest in our future. Plus, you get some really nice Christmas music that doesn't have religious themes to it. So you're going to enjoy that. We're also going to talk about the cushion, as I promised in the last episode. And then I'm also going to talk about something that came up with a listener, I guess we'll say, about an annuity question. So I always love talking about how wonderful, little radio quotes going up, how wonderful annuities are. So let's get into the cushion first. I have a listener email I'm going to read to you here. I am working on getting my cushion going. I read in an article that one financial advisor advises taking 110 and subtracting your age, and that's the percentage you should have in stocks. Do you buy into that philosophy? Why or why not? I am 53, so my percentage of stocks would be 57%. Also, when building the cushion, the article promoted Vanguard Total Bond Market Index. Is that a good place to start? So the nice convenient thing about this is the very last episode, 237, I talked about the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index. So I'll just give the very short answer. No, that is not a very good place to start. And go back to 237, listener, if you didn't hear that, and hear some thoughts about the Total Bond Market Index. And again, just a warning in case you didn't go back to that episode or you haven't or you're not going to, just because I think there's a better way to do it doesn't mean that the total bond market index is horrible and awful. On a scale of 1 to 10, it might be a 7. In retirement, it might be a 6 or a 5. I think you can get closer to 9 or 10 in our 10-point scale of perfect portfolio. So keep that in mind. But go back and listen to that. So in reference to this idea of taking 110 and subtracting your age, very, very lazy, very, very sloppy, very, very conservative bullshit answer. So no, I do not buy into that philosophy. It depends. And of course, as an example, my dad, who passed away at the age of 81 a few years ago, he had 90% of his money in stocks at the time of his death. And we, as his descendants, are very, very happy about that because he could have had a lot of money in bonds for decades and made far less money. It does not mean that the right percentage of stocks for you is 90%. I'm just saying that a simplistic formula, at his age of 81, he should have had 30% in stocks, not 90. So it's kind of like an old analog clock. You know, it's a broken clock is right twice a day. Well, this formula might be right twice a day, but you don't even know because it's that bad. So I don't use it. I don't like it. And then, of course, the follow-up from the author, the emailer, why or why not? And so I've already talked about that it's overly simplistic and conservative. And so I went into a little bit about why what I do to build a cushion. So things that matter to me is how many years to retirement. Normally, I don't start the cushion until about 12 years from retirement. So when you're going to retire matters. Why make, at least in today's bond world, 3% when you could at least make a theoretical 10%? Now, of course, stock markets go down, and they can go down a lot in the short term, but every single time you look in the long run, they eventually go back up. Maybe that changes in the future. I don't have any data to support that. So years to retirement is important. The size of your portfolio is important. The risk profile that you're willing to take. Some people want to be very aggressive. Some people want to be more conservative. We have to keep in mind what your budget is and your other sources of income. So if you are a husband and wife team and you both have a pension and you have an apartment building that you own or some farmland that spits off money, well, then that decreases the dependence you have on the stock market investments. You can take more risk. Another thing is that if you can cut your spending, say for a year or two, if you have a year like 2008, where you could say, okay, this year we're going to live on 20 grand less, and you don't have to take as much money out, your cushion could be smaller. So all those things go into it, and it's complicated. So the idea that there's this one number fits all, I've heard people say that you should have 40% in bonds at retirement. I hear people say simplistically 50-50. There's this 110-year rule. There's also the 100-year rule, which is even more conservative, where you should have more and more of your money in bonds. Now, generally, it's true that the closer to retirement or in full retirement, you should have more in bonds than you had when you're 30. That's a basic default. And I have people ask me on a regular basis, what is that percentage? What should that be? Well, again, I just went through all the reasons why it's complicated. But now I'm going to give you a bit of simplistic advice that's probably wrong. But people keep asking me for it, so I'm going to give it. But I have to warn over and over again, this is likely the wrong answer for you. So keep that in mind. This is probably the wrong answer for you. But if you can't get an answer anywhere else, if you don't want to read anything else, you don't want to talk to somebody, you don't want to even bother sending me an email, which you can do, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. Here is going to be my very, very crude estimate on what the cushion should be. And keeping in mind, for most people, this is going to be too conservative. But if I give you a percentage that's too small and the market drops and you can't make your retirement on time, you're going to be very upset. So I am motivated by the same logic that a lot of advisors are. If I give something generic, it has to be safer. So keeping that in mind. So without knowing anything about you and with the understanding that this is probably the wrong advice for you specifically, each individual listener, I'm going to do it anyway. Your cushion should be about 40%. Now, most people, where we sit down and do a detailed analysis of all the factors that I've mentioned before and many others, 40% is too big. But I don't have that information, and you asked for a crude number. So 40%. 40% should be in the cushion. When should it be in the cushion? Okay, well, I would start about 12 years before retirement and grow it until about 2 years before retirement. So 2 years before retirement, you should have the entire 40%, because you don't want to get caught in a big pinch like 2008, people that had 100% of their money in the stock market and they were ready to retire. Well, you lose 40% of your money in a year. Now you can't retire. You don't want to be in that position. So 40% in your portfolio in the cushion should be there 2 years before retirement. And you should start approximately 12 years before retirement. So you have a 10-year period where you're growing the cushion. So again, assuming that you want to do it at a uniform rate, I would start with 4% of your portfolio in the cushion, 12 years from retirement, and then grow it by 4 percentage points. And those are 4 percentage points in relationship to your total portfolio. So it'd be 4, 8, 12, 16, so on. So it's just meant to be an idea, something for you to think about. Other advisors will have very different numbers, but we're in the ballpark. And of course, the question was the total stock market or total bond market. Is that a good place? It's okay. I don't love it. If you're 10 to 12 years out and you want to put your 4% in there to start for the first year or two, fine, whatever. It's 4%, 8% of your portfolio. But it's something that I think there's better ways to do it. Also, I've previously talked about the cushion in detail, and I'm going to throw out some show numbers in case you want to go back. Show 214 and 220. And then a little older is 211, 160, and 168. That's not necessarily every time it's come up. I don't take very good notes about what I talked about on my own fucking show. So there's some ideas for my notes. So you could check that out. Now, the question is, what should you have in the cushion? And again, this is one of those things. It depends. It always depends. For example, back in 2006, 2007, maybe even 2008 and 2009, I would have a generous portion of the cushion money would be in intermediate and long-term U.S.-based bonds, U.S. government, U.S. corporate bonds, because they paid a lot of money. And the nice thing about some bonds, anyway, especially long-term bonds, when the stock market goes down, there's generally a tradition, a history where the Federal Reserve, the Fed, will lower interest rates to stimulate economic activity. And almost every single time the market goes down and there's a recession, this is what the Fed does. When they do that, and the interest rates go down, the value of the bonds go up. And the longer the bond, the more it goes up as a percentage. So a real simple example, if you buy a 20-year bond, that means, and let's say you're going to put $100,000 in there and it's going to pay you 4% dividend. Every year, you will get paid $4,000. And at the end of 20 years, that's the term of the bond, you will get back your $100,000. Assuming the bond doesn't default. And that's where quality comes in. If you have U.S. government bonds, they're not going to default unless Trump fucks up everything. But assuming that that doesn't happen, you're going to get your $100,000 back plus $4,000 a year. The problem comes is that if 1 year from now, the Federal Reserve and economic stimulation has created a situation where those bonds now pay 5%, if you at some point want to sell your bond, or if you're in a bond fund, no one wants the bond that pays 4% because I can go buy a $100,000 bond that pays 5%. I can make $5,000 a year or $4,000 a year. What would you choose? You would choose the $5,000 a year. It's the same fucking bond. You just bought it a different year. So if you need to sell that bond that pays $4,000 or 4%, you're going to have to mark it down to almost $80,000 so that the new buyer would effectively get a 5% dividend on that bond. Because otherwise, why would they buy it from you? Now, it won't fall quite that much because in 20 years, the bond will be redeemed for $100,000. So it's complicated. And the quick and easy way to figure that out for a specific bond, or more importantly for a bond fund, because I recommend index bond funds, is a number called the duration. And any good fund that you have, you should be able to find the duration. If you cannot, you might want to ask yourself, why are you investing in it? The duration gives you a mathematical calculation, estimation of how much your bond fund is affected by a 1 percentage point change in interest rates. And there's short-term rates, there's intermediate-term rates, there's long-term rates, there's domestic rates, there's international rates. So it gets complicated. But if it's a 100% high-quality U.S. government bond index fund, the duration is really tight calculation, really tight estimate of what will happen. And if the duration number is 20 and your fund pays up 4%, if interest rates go up 1 percentage point, you will lose 20%. You'll still get your 4% dividend. So your net return for the year would be minus 16%. Not very good for the cushion. The reason I used it more back in 2005, 2006, is because interest rates for those kind of bonds were much higher, 7 or 8%. And if the U.S. market goes down, they might go up, which is what happened. And you can make 10, 12, 14% a year on high long-term bonds. So they have their place. It's just not today, not in 2017, because interest rates are really low and they're likely to go up. I don't know as a fact, but I think the odds of rates going up is much greater than going down. So here are some of the funds that I use. I am not going to give you percentages to put in each fund because, again, this is very generic suggestion. This is not specific advice to you. And I always seem to get a problem whenever I give, even like before in this segment, I'm going to get in trouble because I made a very crude guesstimate of 40%. Someone's going to misuse that. So I'm a little hesitant, but we're going to do this anyway. So first of all, you would want to have some money in the money market. I usually set up portfolios with 1 to 2% in the money market. Part of that is because if it's a client, I want to be able to get my money out my bill. So I want to get paid. Phil wants to get paid. That's part of it. I tell people that you get to put my greed to work for you because the bigger your portfolio gets over time, the more money I make. We have the same goal. If you hire an advisor who gets paid a commission, their goal is to get the biggest commission up front. Not necessarily, but often. The biggest commission up front, and then they don't really care if your portfolio goes up or down. And if you call them back years later and have questions, you are now an annoyance unless they can talk you into buying something new with the same money, and then they can get a commission again. Okay, next is, and these are in order of most conservative to most aggressive. The next one I like is the Vanguard. Yeah, you're going to be surprised here. Vanguard. I'm going to stop saying Vanguard because they're all fucking Vanguard. Short-term government bond index. The symbol for this is VBIRX. And if any of these symbols don't come through or you can't distinguish letters, send me an email, Phil@Polaris Financial Planning, and I'll tell you what they are. The next one is slightly more aggressive, very, very slightly, and a slightly higher return. That is the short-term corporate index. And all of these are, like I said, Vanguard, and they're all going to be Admiral shares, which may mean you need to have a lot of money, like 50 grand to get into position. But if you research them, you can find a class, a share that you can get in with a lower amount of money. The short-term corporate fund is VFSUX. The next one is Jenny Mae's, and these are based on housing interest rates, home loans. They pay a little bit more, a little bit longer duration, a little bit more risk, a little more volatility, but still not too bad. And that is VFIJX. Now, something totally different, emerging market bonds. Emerging market bonds pay a higher dividend, higher yield than almost anything you can get in the United States, except for the last category that we'll do next. And they're not really subject to U.S. interest rate fluctuations. They are subject to international interest rate fluctuations. And the question you probably are going to ask, what about currency rates? A great fucking question. If you buy an emerging market bond fund or an international bond fund that's not at Vanguard, you must make absolutely certain that they adjust daily to the changes in exchange rates for currencies. Because if you do not do that, this bond fund, for example, the emerging market bond fund at Vanguard, might pay a 5% dividend, but if the dollar goes up 15%, you're going to lose net 10%. So without that kind of adjustment, you're basically doing hedging against currency exchange rates. Not something I do, not something I recommend. I don't know what those are going to be. So you want to eliminate that effect, and Vanguard does that with their international bond funds. The emerging market fund is VGAVX. And I will say that the last two items, this emerging market bond fund and the next one that I mentioned, both of them probably should be less than 5% of your total overall portfolio. So just keep that in mind. And the last one, the highest risk and probably the highest return, is the Vanguard High Yield, also known as Junk Bond Fund. Now, in the last year, this thing's made almost 12%. It's been fantastic. But it can also lose 12 or 15%. So You don't want this to be a really big part of your cushion. And again, at most, absolute top end, 5% of your overall portfolio. It can add to your returns. It can add to the dividends you get in your cushion. And if you're in full retirement and you have these bond funds, these bond index funds, if the U.S. stock market drops 25% and you need to take out your annual amount of money that you're taking to make your budget, you generally want to take out from wherever went up the most. So if the U.S. market is down 25%, you look at all these different types of bonds and you say to yourself, which one went up the most? And this is one of the reasons for having the diversity of the bond funds, which you cannot get if you put it all in the total bond fund, which you cannot get at all if you have a target date fund. But if you have this spread of half a dozen bond funds, you can look at which one did the best. If the high yield is up 12% in that year, well, take your money out of there. That's a no-brainer. If the high yield and the emerging markets are down, but the Ginnie Mae made 10, take your money out there. If the Ginnie Mae is also down and the corporate's also down and the short-term U.S. government bond only made 1%, but that's your best achieving result, that's where you want to take the money out. You want to try to avoid selling at a loss. You want to avoid selling when the markets are down or your bonds are down. So that's one of the reasons to have many different types of investments. After interest rates go up several percentage points, I will start to include intermediate and long-term bonds into the cushion. I do not recommend that today in 2017. When I will change my mind on that, I do not know. Stay tuned. If the show is still on 5 years from now and those rates are significantly higher, I'll talk about it. Not a big deal. So that's some on the cushion. And now I want to do a brief thing on an annuity example. So another listener sent me some information about an annuity that they bought. And I'm going to make some changes to make it easier numbers and to make the illustration for the purpose of the podcast. But I will point out that this annuity was sold to them inside of an IRA. You should never, ever, ever buy an annuity inside of an IRA. It might even be said that you shouldn't buy an annuity, period, but you definitely don't want to do it inside of an IRA. And I've had whole shows about that, and we'll probably talk about it some more in the future. Just keep that in mind. One caveat I do want to talk about, if you work for a hospital or a government agency and you have a 403B, it's often called a TSA or a tax sheltered annuity. It's just like a 401k. In that context, the word annuity means something else. It's not a problem. If you are close to retirement from a job and they offer you a lump sum payment or an annuity, again, the word of use of annuity there is different, and taking the lump sum or the annuity might be the right choice for you. If you want help on the calculation for something like that, again, email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. When I use the word annuity in this episode, I'm talking about something that's sold to you. The age-old saying in the industry is annuities are not bought, they are sold. No one seeks out annuities, they're sold to you. So this person put $100,000 in an annuity, and 2 years later they have $106,000 in the annuity, and they've made about 3% a year. The annuity does have a cap where the most they can make is 4% a year, but they'll never lose money, which is nice. But if they take the money out early, there's a penalty. People fucking hate penalties. It will really make people do amazing things. And the penalty on this is 8%. Well, it's 8% now. It started at 10. So every year you own it, in this case, it goes down by 1%. A very common pattern. Different companies have different programs. And one of the problems with annuities is they're all based on the individual contract that you agreed to. So whenever I talk about an annuity, it either has to be in a general sense or the specific one that I'm talking about. Your annuity will be different. So if they sell it now after 2 years, the penalty has fallen from 10 to 8%. And if they sold it today, they'd get $97,520. But it's worth theoretically $106. So they lose 8% to get out. And so the question is, should they leave it where it is for 8 more years and avoid the penalty? Or should they take the penalty and take the money out? The general default that I go with, if you have an annuity that was sold to you, The default answer is sell, sell, sell. If we can do the mathematics and there's some reason to keep it, it happens. But 98% of the time, the answer is sell. So that's what you should do with this annuity, is sell it. So then I took the calculations and I said, what happens if I make 10% a year? Well, you know what? Let's make it 7%, right? If I make 7% a year on the $97,520 versus the $106, or I make the maximum, the absolute maximum I could make per year is 4% if I leave it in the annuity. And again, you aren't going to make the maximum, at least not every year. And matter of fact, even with the market doing wonderfully for the last 2 years, this person's only made 6% over 2 years. So you're not going to make the 4, but I'm going to leave the 4 in there. Let's assume you make 4% every year in the annuity, and you keep it in there for 8 more years. If you make 4% in the annuity, the $106,000 will grow to $145,000. It's not a bad return. And it does, assuming the contract has this in there, prevent you from losing money over the 8 years. It's not even an option. The worst you could do is get your $100,000 back. As I've talked about on previous shows, when you look at an 8-year time period, there's only one time in the last 116 years that there was a down market over 8 years. That was between 2000 and 2008. Ironically, somewhere between 6 and 7, you'd actually made all your money back, but then 8 went down again. So you're being insured against something that is very rare, and there's a cost to you. So your $100,000 10 years later, or 8 years from today, could be worth $145,000. Not awful. Now that's the theoretical maximum, absolute highest amount if you make the 4% per year compounded. If instead you have it in the U.S. stock market and you made 7%, and a 7% I picked because that could almost be like half stocks and half bonds. So if you made 7%, you would get $167,000. You would have $22,000 more by not being in the annuity, and I'm giving the annuity the theoretically best return every fucking year and only 7% for your investment. Now, if we change your investment to 10, because you're inside of an IRA, at least in this case, you have no tax consequences. You get to keep all the money. Yes, you have to pay taxes when the money comes out, but the same thing with the annuity. Any theoretical argument that an annuity is a good idea, which I don't even know that I would agree with, is that you can avoid taxes for, or at least while it's growing. But the money's already inside of an IRA. You already have that advantage. In this case, the difference between the annuity at $145,000 or the investment is $210,000. You can make $64,000 more in the next 8 years by having this money invested in the U.S. stock market index versus the annuity. Now, if the annuity only makes 3%, the number gets bigger, of course. You could talk about $74,000, $75,000, maybe even $80,000 improvement in your investment. The other thing, of course, is that if you have this and you're not near retirement, or let's say you're 60, you might live 20, 30 years. It's not just the next 8 years. It's the next 12 or 22 or 32 years after that. And if you have a bigger amount to start with, it's going to grow even bigger. So some more math on annuities. The default is if you have an annuity, you shouldn't. If it's inside of an IRA, you really shouldn't. If you have any questions about that, contact me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And so those are topics. And we're going to have a couple of sound bites today. And I'm going to tell you it's from Jim Jeffries, a well-known comedian. And he's really going to dig in on religion, which I think I might need to do some more of. I'm going to see what I can do over the next few weeks. I'm just getting so fucking sick and tired of trying to explain the evil shit that the Republican Party and Donald Trump are trying to do, that I don't feel like I have my focus on religion. But it's hard to talk about something that has been around forever and is insidious and warps the minds of children when your executive branch of your government is on fire. So I don't know. I don't know how much I'll get off of politics, but it's probably going to come up some more. But maybe a few episodes here, we'll talk more about religion, and hopefully some of you will like that. Anyway, quick break with Jim Jeffries' sound bites, and then we're going to have our interview and some Christmas music.
I'm not worried about dying because I'm an atheist, right? Now, I know that this is a Christian country and I stand up for your right to be religious, but please know that you're wrong, right? Please know that you're living in a fantasy land and that after you die, nothing happens. Stop being a fucking child. I'm not scared of dying because I'm an atheist. I know I'll just rot in the ground. Right? I won't even know I'm dead. Do you want to know why? Because I'll be fucking dead. Religious people worry because they believe in heaven. If there's a heaven, there has to be a hell. And everyone who's read that book knows that you've done enough shit to go to hell. Right? And that makes it very stressful on your deathbed, doesn't it? Knowing what a prick you are, going, oh, this isn't going to be good. Right? I don't want to go to heaven. I don't even want the option of heaven. I don't want to exist in a conscious state for the rest of eternity constantly thinking. I don't like thinking as it is. Where's me passport? Can't punch women in the face. The Bible calls heaven eternal bliss. I don't care how blissful it is. It's eternal. You'll get used to it, and then you'll be fucking bored. And what's hell meant to be like? Fire and brimstone and eternal agony? That's what's written in the Bible. That's God's book. As far as I know, the devil hasn't brought out a book. We don't know his side of the argument, right? If you ask me, the devil and God are having an argument. The devil's being a bigger fucking man. Because God's just writing shit about him. And the devil's going, I'm not even going to fucking comment, son, if you talk about me like that.
All right, everybody, welcome back. You are still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show, and I have a special holiday thing for you. I mean, when I say holiday, I mean Christmas time or whatever you celebrate late in December. And I have with me Tylean Polly. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm very good, and my listeners may pick up, there's a subtle bit of accent, and you're calling from where?
Coventry, England.
Coventry. So it's like a late day for you. I mean, it's the middle of the afternoon for me.
Yeah, 7 p.m. here.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. And just for my listeners, not that it matters, but it's 1 for me and it's 7 for you, so it's still not too awful late. Coventry, England, huh?
Yeah.
Let's pretend for a moment I don't know where that is in England. Why don't you tell us, just for the listener's sake, where is Coventry?
Smack dab in the middle of England. But it's quite funny because I spent a lot of time living in London. I've moved a lot. I'm actually from Pennsylvania, but I've moved all over the world, and I lived in London for a long time. And in London, everything north of London is up north. But when you come to Coventry, which is the Midlands, and you call it the north, they get very upset because it's not the north.
Well, in Illinois, anything south of I-80, which is like 75th, 80th percentile in the north part of the state, anything below that is southern Illinois. So, 80% of the state is the south. Matter of fact, some parts west of Chicago are considered southern Illinois by people in Chicago because it's just hick towns one after another, and it's not Chicago, real city.
Yeah.
So what's this Pennsylvania connection? You were born there? You grew up there? What's going on with Pennsylvania?
Yeah, born and raised in Pennsylvania. And then later on, when I went to university in Pennsylvania as well, to University of Bloomsburg. And then I came over to England. I did a master's degree. I stayed, became a British citizen. Then I moved to Spain for a while. Now I'm back in England, and yeah, I even lived in Northern Ireland for a while as well.
And what did you go to England for initially?
Mostly because I was just desperate to, if I could be really honest, I was desperate to get out of America.
And this was what year?
This was 2007.
2007. Well, you can come back because we've made America great again.
You've made America great again?
Not-
I know,
not
I've
me.
heard.
Not
So
me
I'm going to have
personally.
to, look into this now.
Yeah, it's everything's been fixed, and
Yes,
yeah,
it's all sorted. It's all good.
yeah. Matter of fact, the really wealthy people are getting big tax cuts. That problem's been solved. So
Oh, fantastic. I was so worried about them. I was keeping me up at night.
well, one of the I constantly talk about and have posts on, and forgive me, we'll just meander into this a little bit, but one of the things in the Republican tax bill, which fingers crossed never passes, is a change in the definition of what defines living below the poverty line. And so basically it lowers the poverty line. So it's a definitional change by modifying how inflation is calculated. And by doing that over time, they can take credit for decreasing the number of people that live in poverty simply by changing the definition of what it means to be in poverty.
Brilliant. That sounds very Republican.
I
Yes.
know, isn't that great? These guys are some fucking clever people, but they're evil, not sinful. That's not the right word. Sadistic. That's better fit. So you went to England, and recently you were in Spain?
Yeah, I spent 3 years living in Spain and in Valencia. And just recently moved back to England.
Valencia. That sounds like a nice Italian name.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Or a place they grow
Yeah,
oranges.
Valencia's lovely. Yeah. It's a nice place to live. Yeah.
Well, that is fantastic. And of course, we're going to get into the music. That's why, listeners, that's why she's here. We're going to talk about some secular Christmas music. Because you created these songs, I'm guessing you're not particularly religious?
No. You could put it that way mildly.
Yeah, I like to be courteous. Let the person speak for themselves.
I'm definitely, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any religion at all. But I do sometimes waver into anti-theist. When various things happen and it gets my hackles up and it upsets me. And it's the kind of stuff that, obviously each to their own. And if, you research these religions and you really believe that and you want to live that kind of a life, like the teachings of Jesus are certainly not bad to live by if they actually did live by them. But it's not religion is not for me, and it's something that's definitely not going to be part of raising my own children, and so that's why I wanted to do this this album, that it was Christmas music that I love, because I'm a musician, I'm a singer, of course I love Christmas music. It's very much a part of how I grew up in my life and to this day, and I absolutely love my Christmas music, but it is so, it's bittersweet because it has all these overtones that you can't remove if you're listening to all the stuff done as it's supposed to be done of Christ and everything, and I just did not want that tainting my children's heads. I set about doing a very traditional Christmas album, but replacing all of the religion with secular ideas, words, etc.
Well, I like it. And of course, you probably know this. I don't know if my listeners do, because I have one of the smartest audiences anywhere. A lot of the Christmas songs steal from even older pieces of music that weren't related to Christianity at all.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's a centuries-old honored tradition of taking a beautiful piece of music and putting to it what you want to say. And of course, my listeners will happily point out there's a lot of secular Christmas music like Frosty and Rudolph and Here Comes Santa Claus and things like that. But you took some of the more religiously themed ones.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see if I can read way over there on my computer. You have God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, and you change it to Oh Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is we're just going to do a sample on this, because at some point we're going to tell the listeners how to buy it, and we don't want to give them the whole songs for free. And we checked this, and I think you'll be able to hear it if I can get. I've got two computers running here, so I have the mouse with my left hand, and it's a real problem. So let's listen to a sample of "Oh Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." abrupt ending. Sorry about that. But
That's right.
why don't you tell us a little bit about your ideas and thoughts behind that song?
It's one of my favorite, and but it is so, some of them, it's a word here, it's a word there, but that one is completely religious. There is nothing you could do to ungodify it,
Yeah.
other than completely rewrite the song. And that is one of the tracks that I did do an entirely new version. And instead of talking about, birth of Christ and everything as it does, I made it about the history of Christmas, taking it back to the fact that it does predate Christ and Christianity, and that we have been doing pagan solstice festivals at that time of year for as long as man has been on this planet. Well, since we have records anyway.
Yeah.
And, it's always been, we've always celebrated certain times of year, usually the solstices, the equinoxes, and so on, and harvest and what have you. And, it's just the kind of thing that we always do. And it's a bit of a reminder, because believe it or not, some Christians have actually bought the album just because they quite liked it. And they actually said something to the effect of, that's true, actually. I guess people always did celebrate even before Christianity at that time of year. So there's almost a little educational element as well to it.
Now, we were also talking about you lived in Spain for a while. If you don't mind, how did that come about? And, tell us a little bit about Spain.
Well, we moved to Spain because my husband is he is a science teacher. And things in England over the last several years have gotten very much in parallel to America, have gotten very hard, after the financial collapse, and then, austerity and recessions and things
Brexit
like
will
that.
fix all that, right?
Yeah. So, of course. Brexit's going to fix everything. And so we decided it would be easier to live, and also better for our children to go to Spain, and we'd have a better quality of life there. And so we did. Now, of course, we had no idea what the future was bringing us with things like Brexit, and everything got really complicated on us all of a sudden. But for a while, Spain was really brilliant. Very cheap to live. He was enjoying his work and actually coming home to the family, not coming home to do marking and lesson planning until 10 o'clock at night. And just it's a very socialized country. So everything like our eldest son has autism, and the services for autism there are fantastic. I mean, they are right on top of everything, having him in language therapy and things like that. And it was just the right thing for our family at that time. So that's what we did.
Now, do you speak any Spanish?
Sí, por supuesto.
That
Yes.
sounds good to me because I don't know anything. So, and of course, I have to ask, how about Italian?
I did study Italian for a little bit. I can understand a lot.
Well, I'm
but
sure if
then,
you speak Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, also because I speak a bit of French, and there's a little bit of French in Italian as well. And so I can pull out and understand. To open my mouth and regurgitate it back, a little bit more difficult, because then Spanish or something else falls out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I actually have a really good friend who's from Italy, and she sometimes speaks Italian at me, and I speak Spanish back to her, and we understand each other fine.
Yeah, my daughter and I have something similar. She's fluent in Portuguese.
Yes.
And so she'll say something in Portuguese. Now, the problem, of course, is the accent is so much different from Italian that she has to do it really, really slow. But if someone talks in Spanish, I do pretty well. French is a little harder for me because of just the accent difference.
Very different.
It's an amazing thing that only, I started this when I was 45 learning Italian, and I always thought I was somehow challenged and I couldn't learn another language. And then I met people that knew 2 or 3, and some of them were really stupid people. And I thought that can't be it. And I'm just doing it wrong.
Actually, funny enough, you say that because I took in high school, I took Spanish and French. Those were our options, and I managed to finagle my way into taking them both by giving up study halls. And years of these languages, and I could barely speak them.
Yeah.
And so then, as an adult, especially after moving over to Europe, and having the opportunity to be able to use these languages, I would try to speak to people and I would just sound so stupid and I couldn't understand a word they said. And I had to go back all the way to the beginning and learn all over again from scratch by ear. Because when you're learning a language, it's not just learning a language. You're actually learning it 4 times. You're learning how to speak it. You're learning how to understand it. You're learning how to read it. And you're learning how to write it. And that's 4 different brain functions, essentially. And when you're learning it within the American school system, you're learning how to read it and write it. You're barely learning how to speak it and almost hardly learning how to understand it. So it's useless. Because
I agree 100%. And I had French in high school and college, and I read the book Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, and beyond the title of that book and Répondez-vous s'il vous plaît, that was about all the French I could get out.
Yeah.
It was horrible, and I found a new way to study by sound.
Yeah.
And after 5 months, I went to Italy, and I could actually communicate with people verbally. Yeah. Which kind of freaked me out. So, did you do some special program, or you were on the ground and you just learned?
No, I did. I started getting all the Pimsleur audio programs.
I was just going to recommend that. My favorite.
They're fantastic. Oh, yes. I love them. And so I kind of just started because I studied German in at college university. I get confused because here they call it university and college is something quite different. And so I say college, that's not right. No, it is right. I don't know. I have to translate even my English between American and British.
It's just like you said that you studied at university, and I'm like, that's not something that's said in America.
No, at college.
Well, they could say university, but they wouldn't say at university. They'd just say I went to the University of so and so. Where in British, you might say, I studied at university. It's a different phrasing.
Actually, they wouldn't even say that. They'd say, when I was at uni.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. When I was at uni, I studied the German.
That's right. Well, I should figure out a way to get Pimsleur to be a sponsor to my show, because I talk about how awesome that is all the time. But I absolutely adored that.
Yeah, get them to send you some free courses. I currently have my eye on Icelandic.
Oh my, they're a glutton for punishment. That's rough.
Yeah, we got married in Iceland, actually, right before that volcano erupted that grounded all the flights. So we ended up being stuck there for about 2 weeks.
Oh,
stuck
nice.
there in quotations. It was brilliant.
Yeah, don't they have boats?
They do, but we wanted to leave. Ha!
Yeah.
That was great. Absolutely great. Love the place.
Well, I have another song that I wanted to play. This is the Ukrainian Bells. Ukrainian Bell Carol, I guess is the proper name.
Yeah.
And I not only do I love bells, and I love the arrangement on this, I thought it was so appropriate to play this while there still is a Ukraine.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So hang on. I'm going to hit the button, and hopefully this will just play right away.
Hark, all the bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away, Christmas is here, bringing good cheer to young and old, meek and the bold, ding dong, loud is their song, with joyful ring, all caroling, one seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air, oh how they pound, raising the sound, here and there, telling the tale, gaily merry, while people sing songs of good cheer, Christmas is here, ding, merry, merry, merry is their song, with joyful ring, all caroling, come on, they said, on without a their joyful tone to every home. All other bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away, Christmas is here, bringing good cheer to young and old, meek and the bold.
Hey, that one, I'll just fade out. How's that sound? Oh, that's smooth.
Excellent fade.
So that was very nice. And of course, there's the whole album. And what is the album called?
It is called The Atheist Christmas Album.
And
can't get more clear than that, really.
Sure. Where would one find it?
atheistchristmas.com. You can actually get a free track. The very first one you played, God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Oh, Rest You Merry Gentlemen, the new and improved version. And and if you want to get it immediately, you can also go to atheistchristmas.bandcamp.com.
Ah, the old Bandcamp. It's not on Amazon yet, though?
No, not yet. I kind of did that on purpose because it's kind of an all or nothing once you go down the Amazon route, and that includes things like Spotify and all these streaming services. And streaming is for the consumer very convenient, for the musician very difficult.
Yeah. It's a tricky thing. I used to actually own part of a company that did audiobooks, and at some point Amazon just said, hey, we want to make audiobooks cheaper, and so they lowered the prices, and we get a percentage of the money that's brought in, and the percentage stayed the same, but the total money just dropped 20% overnight. It can be hard to run a business that way.
Yeah, it's they're the way that they work, the algorithms and everything. It's unless you are in the very top echelon, it's very hard to break through that number, that threshold where you start to get anything back really from it. And so I'm kind of in my own little marketing techniques, I'm doing a bit of windowing. So like they do in the film industry. So it's kind of only available directly through me at this moment. And then next year, maybe we'll do Amazon and Spotify and everything. But
I'll give
as it's new, I'm trying to hopefully bring people my way.
Sure. A few other titles for the listeners. The Holly and the Ivy, Lost in the Snow, Here We Come a Wassailing. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. What Day Is This? Go Tell It on the Mountain. Oh, Christmas Eve, Silent Night. Everyone has... Oh, wait, the title's too long. Everyone has someone on Christmas except me. And Non-Christmas, Old Lang Syne. So that's your New Year... That's the New Year song, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm losing my freaking mind. Total of 14 tracks, so people can go check that out and buy it. Is there any other things that you want to tell us about the music before we move on?
Actually, you know what's really funny? Here We Come a Wassailing. That is a very old traditional English song. You know what? No one in England knows that song. Only Americans know it. Funny.
That is odd.
And because I had some other musicians actually sing on that one as well, because it's like, oh, I can't have this caroling song with nothing but me on it. And then I've never heard this song. Like, you're English. You're English. How have you never heard this song?
Just wacky thoughts that pop into my head. One is that there should be a Pimsleur British so I could learn how to speak if I go over to England.
Yes.
And then when I'm in Italy speaking in Italian, they always tell me that I have a British accent. And I thought, I've always wanted a British accent.
Oh,
but it's only when
I'm halfway there. It doesn't matter where I am in the world, I get told I have an accent. Because here they tell me, oh, you sound American. And like, you tell an American that and they'll disagree with you. But the thing, because I'm actually, I'm an actress. And so no matter what role I have, whether it's an American television or some British, I have to put the accent on. I will get told off for it. It's like, I know I have a weird accent.
Yeah.
But it's good because now I get both worlds.
There you go. I like it very much. Well,
thank you.
Tylean Polly, thank you so much for telling us about your album, and hopefully some of my listeners will go buy it and you can make a few dollars. I really appreciate it. And of course, have a great Christmas.
Thank you so much, and same to you. Cheers.
And what's meant to happen when you die and go to heaven? You see a big bright light. You walk towards the light. What's at the end of the light? All your dead relatives. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. You ever spent a weekend at your grandparents' house? It's fucking shit! You'd be out there for an hour going, wish all me friends would die. Be out there meeting everyone. Hello, Nana. Hello, Grandad. Hello, Uncle who used to touch me. How did you get up here? Oh, that's right, you used to work for the church. You hear that little groan when I said that? When I said you have to work for the church? It's because religious people are in the crowd and they don't like hearing facts. That's a fact. There's been pedophiles in the Catholic Church. It's been on 60 Minutes. Fucking fact. But I say, and it's like, oh, no, because religious people will forgive God for fucking anything. If he, in their mind, he does good things. Rainbows, children's laughter, shit like that, right? But when he does bad things like hurricanes, AIDS, cancer, child molestation, then we just go, oh, well, God works in mysterious ways. What type of an excuse is that? What is mysterious about acting like a fucking asshole? That is like the least mysterious activity since the dawn of time. If I ever date a religious girl, she's going to come home and I'm going to be raping her mum, right? And she's going to look at me and go, what are you doing? And I'm going to go, I'm mysterious. I've always been mysterious.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. I know we've covered a lot already, and the show is long, so I'm going to keep this last little segment short, and I don't have any reviews to read. So if you want to leave a review, iTunes or Stitcher, that'd be great. The last thing is a little bit of a downer, so if you're not in the mood for it, just end the show now. It's going to be okay. We'll get on without you. But a activist in the secular movement, Scott Smith, unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, decided that the solution to his problems was to kill his wife and then himself. And unfortunately, they have children, which were thankfully safe at school when this went down. But these children now have lost both their parents. And it's a very, very awful thing. I didn't know Scott particularly well, but he's been on the show, and I've been on his show, and we have met a couple times at conferences in person. So for me, it's a real human being. It's someone that I've had direct physical contact with in the world, not just purely a Facebook friend. So it is disturbing to me. And just a little side note, I put that up on Facebook, and I was really kind of bothered by some responses people have on Facebook, and this specifically, but in things in general. Give people a little more fucking love, people. That be a little bit more charitable, for fuck's sake. I got criticized because I didn't say Scott Smith's wife's name. I don't know her, and when the story came out, it didn't include her name. So I said Scott Smith and his wife, just like I am now. I still don't know her name. Yes, I could have researched it, and maybe I'm being really lame and lazy. Fine. Fuck me then, whatever. But I lost someone that I know personally, and I was a little sad about it, a little upset about it. And someone came on my wall and went on a large rant about unrelated topics, and that I'm part of the problem because I said his wife. So could I have done it better? Maybe. But, if you think someone can do something better, you can contact them. You can send me an email. It's not like I'm fucking hiding and you can't reach me. But to have this long, winding rant about how awful I am on my own Facebook wall while I'm grieving for someone that I knew personally, I don't find it as productive as you might imagine. And, the counter argument is going to be, well, when is the right time? Give me a fucking couple of days, will you? I mean, we're not talking about gun control here, although we should. That's a whole nother topic. But we're just talking about Phil and someone he knew personally tragically killing their spouse and then themselves. And it's horrible. And it's horrible for a lot of people. And a lot of those people, way more horrible than it is for me. So a little compassion. And if I word something poorly or I'm not sensitive enough, contact me. Don't just rip me and make yourself a bigger ass than you think I am just to prove your point. Contact me. I can fix my post. I can learn. I can adjust and make adjustments. But if you come at me in my face, it's not helpful. I guess that's my personal rant. I didn't mean to do this. Sorry. So we have the Smith girls that now don't have their parents. There is now a GoFundMe that has been set up by the family, and I'm going to ask you to consider going and giving some money. I've already shared it on Facebook and the Facebook page for the Phil Ferguson Show. And in case you don't want to do any of those, you can just go to GoFundMe, and their specific thing is called Help the Smith Girls. Right? So, I mean, it's not that hard. I'm looking at the page now, and it actually says Fund for the Smith Girls. So I'm not sure which way you can look it up. You can look at my Facebook or Fund for the Smith Girls. The direct link is gofundme.com//help the Smith Girls. So there's two different names. But find it. If you can't find it, you're not 100% sure you're in the right place, send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I'll send you the link if you get lost. But it'd be a real nice opportunity for us to show that for at least for a few moments, we can be above yelling at each other and criticizing each other for not using the right words or the right syntax, and actually show that we care about these kids. It's nice to be a Facebook warrior, but sometimes you just got to fucking do something. And this is something you can do. If you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have any money, don't give anything. I understand. A lot of people don't have money for themselves. If that's you, fine. Don't give any money, but consider sharing the link. The goal here is to raise $50,000 so that these girls can buy supplies for schools and maybe a little bit of money to help them get to college in a few years when they're ready for that. So thank you for listening to my rant. My apologies. If it bothered you, if I could have said this better, let me know nicely. Be an adult about it. And go donate some money and do something nice for somebody that is hurting and is in need of your support. And I'm going to wrap up the show with that. And I do appreciate the listeners. And I do hope to see you personally somewhere at a conference in 2018. Until then, ciao.